jumbo. I think next time when I come, I need to get some of the Israeli terms. The panel discussion is on the new normal for flower shippers of Africa after the pandemic. I don't know how many of you still buy flowers?
Of course.
Roland, do you have flower every day on your table in the office and at home?
Once a week at least.
Once a week. But then that remains for a bit 10 days. Okay, I think we also need to address the elephant in the room, which is high inflation at different cities or different countries. And the cost of living has really gone up. So I don't know how many of us have really given up buying flowers. I do not buy, I can acknowledge that I do not buy flowers. I do not have flowers at home or in the office on a daily basis, only on special occasions. But I think we need to buy flowers. And as we sit to discuss the first panel on new normal, my first question is there a new normal at all? Or it's just a continuation of what we have been doing. To just get started, maybe Ken, reflect on what has been happening in the air freight industry for the last year and a half, 2 years of the pandemic. Some of the biggest learning for you as an airline, and do you think is there a new normal?
I think the key factor we saw from 2020 March was capacity constraints. With cancellation of passenger flights network-wide, there was a high demand for freighter capacity. And with the realization came in that there is a shortage of freighter capacity to meet the industry needs. Priority was being put obviously on life-saving equipment, vaccines. So our perishables took the sort of tail end of priority. So we also saw an adjustment where the freight rates had to be increased marginally to compete with what was going on throughout the network. So I think those were the key changes that we saw: capacity shortage and also very high increase in the freight rates to sustain the operations.
Have things improved now?
We are reaching a stabilization sort of mode as of this year, but the capacity issue still exists. Rates now are obviously on a challenge. There's a push to have the rates lower, and this is not just for the perishables, but the rates are sort of beginning to normalize, but we do not foresee they will go back to the pre-pandemic levels as they were.
Let me get Sanjeev, another cargo airline. Sanjeev's Astral Aviation is planning to become not just an all-cargo African cargo airline, but I think it is from the kind of rapid growth that the airline has seen in the last year and a half to, I think it's I'm not wrong if Astral becomes really a global cargo airline. Sanjeev, your thoughts on the new normal? How do you see the freight rates, capacity coming back, freight rates stabilizing and capacity coming back to support Africa's flower exporters?
Thank you, Reji, and thank you for the compliments. Life is not the same since we last met in 2019. We've actually had, of course, COVID, but in addition to COVID, we've also had the real effects of the Russia-Ukraine war, and this had a number of ripple effects. We've had the ripple effects of high fuel prices. We actually noticed that the fuel prices roller coasted all the way to $110 to the barrel, and for any airline today, fuel still represents 50% of the operating cost because of the aging fleet. So that's been a very big challenge. The second big challenge we've actually seen is, of course, the fact that the world is in recession. And despite the fact that the United States does not believe that the world or that the US is in recession, we're actually going through a recession. And every country in the world, except for Saudi Arabia and perhaps UAE, is not facing a recession. But the rest of the world is in recession, including Kenya. So this also has an effect on the macroeconomic position. Now, as an airline, how do we deal with such a situation? Now, the first thing is that we need to keep flying. We need to make sure that the aircrafts are flying and we're carrying commodities because we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to our customers to actually make sure that their products are actually reaching the markets in Europe, the markets in Dubai, but also we do a lot of intra-African flying. We carry a lot of cargo within to about 6 to 8 different countries in Africa. So I think the most important thing is to keep flying, to be positive, to be optimistic that there will be better days ahead of us. One thing is for sure is that this recession that everybody keeps talking about, that we are feeling, the inflationary pressures, and of course, the challenges of sustainability, global warming, are all things which are directly or indirectly related to the aviation sector, and also directly or indirectly related to the transportation of flowers into Europe and also into the Middle East.
I don't know how many of you have noticed, probably all of us experience that there is an underlying challenge in terms of input costs are rising, the cost of living is really is on the rise. We were at a Junction Mall yesterday, and there was the laundry, and outside the laundry they have put up boards, and we are forced to increase the rate because of the cost of input material is on the rise, so we are forced to increase the charge. So I think that's a reality outside. Now, having heard the airlines, let me get the airports into the discussion. Jacob, how do you see the new normal, and where do you see air freight becoming a good, reliable option for flower exporters?
Thank you very much for that. And I think when we talk about the new normal, I would say that in the air freight landscape, for example, within the airports and network that we operate, I would say things were generally just the normal in terms of airport operations, because we remained open for 24 hours supporting our stakeholders in terms of the movements, and the demand was there, especially for sustaining our lives in terms of medicines and vaccines, and also for sustaining businesses in terms of keeping the supply chains moving, because of course people work from home, but the airfare industry saw people actually still coming out, because there are certain processes that can be automated and some that actually need the human hand. So in terms of the new normal, we have found out that the pandemic came out with the thinking out of the box mindset. The amount of movement from air freight into sea freight, we've seen it increasing. But that is only for a certain category of perishables. Not all perishables can be sustained by sea freight. The value proposition for air freight basically remains predictability, sustainability, and of course reliability of supply chains. That's how global supply chains work. If there is visibility and traceability from end to end, which is the provision of what air freights do, or air freight does, then air freight still take the center stage in terms of the speed value proposition that it has. But in terms of costs, the sea freight will take a chunk of it depending on what you're exporting or moving by sea. Generally, you have to look at the theory of constraints, where you've got cost, quality, and speed. So if you jeopardize any of the three variables, then it depends on what kind of business you're doing. And the normal is that air freight still take a center stage in terms of moving highly perishable goods, highly sensitive goods, and I do not foresee a future where that will drastically change in terms of what will be impacted on the movements. The new normal, of course, in terms of what we look at as an airport operator, is that we have tried to support our stakeholders in terms of upping our game. The other day we had an ICAO security audit. We actually emerged the second best in Africa with a score of over 90%. That level of confidence of protecting and ensuring that we're operating in a safe environment, of course, is attractive to our source markets and where we export. That indeed we are operating in an environment that is safe and secure and is reliable in terms of safety, and of course that enhances the kind of quality of handling of the air freight that we are doing. Those are the kind of aspects of the new normal that we're actually looking at and working very closely with our stakeholders. Apart from other COVID or health protocols, closely with the Port Health, very closely with the inspectorate agencies, and other agencies like the police to make sure that you're operating and enhancing the business environment for us to thrive in. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jacob. Roland, I keep talking to Roland at very frequent intervals. I think if I consider new normal for Roland, it is 24/7 at the airport. You call him at 2 in the morning, he must be waiting for another freighter coming from China or from the US. Roland, tell us what has been the new normal for you. This is a question that I've asked you also in the other conferences that you've been participating, and thank you for being part of this event, coming and traveling from Frankfurt. What is new normal, and how do you see air freight becoming or continue to become a reliable mode of transport for flower exporters?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Reji, for inviting me again. It's a multifold, and we heard certain aspects. I think what we have today will not be the normal in the future. So there's numerous aspects that play into the game here. It was mentioned we have the situation with Russia-Ukraine, where the capacity went down as a result of the war and the overflight reductions that we have. So capacity was reduced. We had large carriers going out of service, big numbers in tonnage that have gone down. We've seen demand for pharmaceuticals as a result of COVID. We've seen high-yield cargo coming into the game at the same point in time, reduced capacity. So every commodity is battling for the same space in the aircraft, and Sanjeev will confirm that. So what we are seeing here, and it was mentioned that flowers kind of fell off the rack as a result of others having high demand. So I think it will come back. So what we as an airport, what we are doing, our aim is to serve the global cargo flow. So we are facilitating all commodities that are coming to and from Frankfurt and into Europe and into Asia and the United States. So when it comes to perishables, and we have our managing director here of the Frankfurt Perishable Center and the head of our border control for the Phyto and a gentleman from DHL. So later on they will talk to you and give you more details on that. But what I think is, on one side, you have high yield competing for cargo space. Yes, you have cargo sea freight battling with air freight capacity. We have the disruption in the train services from Asia to Europe that are going through Ukraine. But what I see in the future, we have a new generation of aircraft coming into the market. So we see like Boeing 777s that are being converted as we speak, that will enter the market probably late next year or early 24. There is a massive capacity coming into the market. That is, of course, most of it will replace aging 747 fleet, and it will be a trade-off because the 777 has the same capacity as the 747. But interestingly enough, those carriers operating the old 747s are not the ones that are ordering the new conversions. So that will be the big question that we have. Will those who operate the vintage 747s give them up or not? If not, then the capacity will come back big times. And then, of course, the market will battle for lower yield cargo. And I think this is the big chance for the perishable market in the world. And we see that whether this is roses coming from Ecuador or whether this is coming perishables coming from your region here. Again, this is a global flow. So I don't think this will be the new normal. It will change again very soon. But I think in the long term, the capacity is there. It will come back, and countries will buy flowers. People will buy flowers. You will have, as you mentioned, it's nothing better than sitting at your table or waking up and having flowers in front of you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm saying that a lot of capacity is going to come into the market. Air freight capacity is going to come into market end of 2023, 2024, 2025 with the kind of conversion programs on 300 years. I think these are, again, market is going to compete for the low yield cargo commodities.
330s also.
330s, and I think Sanjeev would be the best person to kind of look at what would be the commodities that could get into the 777 to 200 300 years getting converted. It could be more volumetric cargo that can probably it would also per unit operating cost would be much less. And I think when you compete with the different commodities with the different yield, always the low yield. It's a normal business judgment that your low yield will always get the least preference. Maybe a line from you on terms of the capacity coming into the market and how is that capacity being utilized for low yield commodities? Is that going to be some sort of a norm in 2023, 2024?
Absolutely. When you look at the 777-300 converted freighter, which should be coming out by 2023, we've actually signed up also for 2 units, which we should be getting by 2025, making us the first airline in Africa to sign up for the 777-300 converted freighter. And the reason why we did that is for a number of factors. The first one is to actually have a lower operating cost. And of course, when you compare the 747 with the 777s, there is a 30% difference in the operating cost. And this is something that we can actually pass on to our customers. The second thing is the ability to also carry low yield cargo. And what I mean by low yield cargo is typically we look at vegetables as being low yield because when you look at the flowers, they're high yield, vegetables are low yield, but we're actually seeing a very high demand for avocados into Europe and also into the Middle East. So traditionally avocados moved by sea freight, but we're actually seeing a situation where there's more avocados moving by air. But avocados cannot pay the same yield as flowers. It has a significantly lower yield. It could be even 30 to 40% less than flowers. So we're actually seeing a situation where the demand for avocados at certain seasons is actually higher than the demand for flowers. And what we noticed during COVID was that, of course, people wanted more avocados and less flowers because of the whole dynamics of COVID and people's consumer habits changing during that period of time. So when you look at new aircrafts coming in, this aircraft would actually allow us to have the opportunity of actually offering a good product mix. A mix of the high yield cargo, low yield cargo, and also having the super efficiency of the 777 being able to fly non-stop to new markets. We believe that we would actually be able to fly from Nairobi to the US, which is something that currently is not possible with the exception of the Kenya Airways Dreamliner. But when you look at a full freighter, you could actually fly with the 777-300 ERF to JFK with, I would say, a 70 to 80% load factor. So these are some of the advantages when you actually get, the new aircrafts. And we believe that in 2024, 2025 onwards, the world would be a totally different place. We will actually see a situation where more low-yield commodities would actually be able to have a sign of respect in the main deck cabins of the freighter aircraft.
Thanks.
Yeah. And we've seen that with other countries. For example, India is another example. With long-haul aircraft, their stop in Europe on the way to the United States got obsolete. And that puts, again, that OND, origin destination market, in a highly competitive position and allows you to grow. What Kenya Airport also said, you want non-stop new markets. And there's your opportunity.
After the first round, please keep your questions ready. We will take a few questions from the audience. Let me get Faith. Interesting designation, post-harvest physiologist, cut flower, Amiran Kenya. Maybe it is good that briefly tell us what is the role that you play, and it's all about quality of the flowers. And when it comes to the quality of the flowers, also Kenya. Flowers from Kenya also compete with the flowers coming from Ecuador, Colombia. So perhaps that you can tell us what kind of role that you play in Amiran and how do you ensure that quality of the flower is maintained from farm to table.
Thank you so much, Reji. So at Amiran Kenya, we have so many different departments that support growers, from the plastic materials to irrigation materials to chemicals and fertilizers. So it's a whole chain. And so a few years ago, they decided to set up an entire department on post-harvest handling of cut flower. So what we do in post-harvest is we have 3 major products. We support our growers in botrytis mitigation. We give them hydration products for different flowers depending on their sensitivities. We also have recently the storage and sea freight technology. So apart from the products, we also offer services in terms of flower audits. We go down to the farm level, we check your bacteria count along the chain, we check your time around your cycle time, and cold chain management and all that, and we give our reports and recommendations. And with that, we are trying to make sure that the quality that we export from Kenya is consistently improving.
But what is your assessment about logistic segment of the supply chain? How is air freight, sea freight contributing to ensure that the quality is maintained? I'm sure that you must be getting a lot of feedback from your customers.
Yes. So during the COVID period, we saw a spike in interest in flower storage and flower sea freight transportation. At first, the constant disappointment in terms of cargo capacity and the going up of prices, clients decided to look for alternative ways of holding flowers so that they can target peak seasons, as well as sending the flowers through sea, which is cheaper for them. So luckily we did have a technology even pre-COVID season, but there was no interest, there was no willingness from the growers. But so COVID presented us with a good opportunity for us to really market and offer value to the client. So there's no reason for a client to throw flowers. You can hold them and wait for the market, and that's what we did in 2020 in the peak of COVID. For growers who were selling to countries that didn't have a lot of restrictions, they still managed to store some flowers, get volumes of the yellow roses, and transport during Mother's Day.
Thanks, Ken. For those of us in the air freight, there is a strong competition coming from the sea freight when it comes to flower, and probably you will hear that one in the afternoon. But then that doesn't mean that there is no opportunity for air freight. Air freight is a premium. As you see, that's on time, every time, delivering freshness. You've been operating from Nairobi for several years, and flower export is a significant cargo commodity. Flower is a significant cargo commodity that you carry. What is your promise to flower growers here, flower exporters here, as to how you can enhance their value proposition?
First, just to give some background on Saudi Cargo in terms of perishable movement. We are a global carrier, but we also have a very strong presence in Africa. Out of Nairobi, we operate 6 weekly freighters, 747, that's capacity of about 600 tons a week. And this is to destination Amsterdam and as well as Liège. So out of this market, out of the Nairobi market, we are the leading freighter operator with the largest capacity share, roughly 10% of it out of Nairobi. We also have belly flights from Nairobi, which are wide body, 4 times a week, which serve the Jeddah market or Saudi Arabia market, Middle East market. Looking at the rest of Africa, we are also quite strong in Addis Ababa. We have movements from there 4 times a week with wide body passenger aircraft as well, and 1 freighter a week. We also have presence in Mauritius, Johannesburg currently suspended, and as well as Nigeria. So we have sort of a good spread of understanding of what Africa needs. So just coming back to what you're saying, we've been in Nairobi market since 2010. We started off with 3 weekly freighters, now we are at 6. We understand the needs of the market in terms of cold chain management, and I think that's a promise we have kept to the market, is we'll make sure that when we receive those flowers at export acceptance, we do all necessary in terms of the export handling, onboard flight temperature controls, and also at destination to make sure the import clearance is smooth for the flower importers. So number 1 promise is the cold chain management. Secondly is reliability. When you come into a market like this, there's an expectation, there's a customer expectation that when you say the schedule is 2100 leaving Nairobi, you will have on-time performance. So that's another promise we also give to the market, is on-time performance. Every other airline has its shaky beats. We do have times when we have delays, but on average, we can say 90% on-time performance from Nairobi is a promise we have kept to this market. So those are the 2 key points: cold chain management and on-time performance.
Sanjeev, been talking to different people, Kenya flow counts, and capacity has always been a problem and continues to be a problem. Besides, of course, the biggest problem is the freight rates or volatility in the freight rates. But you are aiming to become a larger player in the world in terms of an all cargo carrier. Give us a sense of the plans that you have in terms of increasing the capacity over the next 3 years. You already have a few 767 already in your fleet.
Thank you, Reji. Currently, we operate 15 freighter aircrafts, making us the second largest cargo airline in Africa after Ethiopian Airlines. And of course, we have some very ambitious plans. Next year, we take delivery of the Boeing 767-300, which is an aircraft which can carry about 55 tons of cargo, non-stop from Nairobi to Europe. And of course, the year after next, we also start getting ready to take delivery of the Boeing 777s. In addition to that, we're also the launch customer for the Embraer 190 freighter, which is more or less a point-to-point aircraft. But what our objective is with all these aircrafts coming in is to diversify our markets. And we believe that no airline should be dependent on Europe. And I think this is something which is a wake-up call for a lot of airlines who have been dependent on Europe, and we need to diversify. And what we mean by diversification is something we started in 2020 when we started flying from Nairobi to Dubai. And we were able to carry flowers, veg and meat into Dubai. But what we also noticed that Dubai is a transit hub. So not a lot of these commodities that we are taking to Dubai are actually meant for Dubai. So we started looking at markets like Saudi Arabia and Israel. And I'm very happy to inform you that we've actually been cleared by the government to fly to Tel Aviv. And we've also been cleared to fly to Riyadh. So with the arrival of our Boeing 757 freighter, we're actually launching flights into Riyadh, Jeddah, and also into Tel Aviv. And why is it that we are doing this? Because we're actually coming up with new markets for our Kenyan shippers. Because we believe that the shippers need to diversify and don't actually have all their exports going into Europe. And diversification is very important. When you look at the market of Saudi Arabia, that is a huge market which has a lot of potential. They have a lot of purchasing power. Consumer spending is also very high. So of course these are the new markets that we're looking at. But of course we should also remember
do they also buy flowers?
Yes, Saudi Arabia is a very big buyer of flowers. Of course not as much as Europe, but they are a bigger buyer of meat compared to flowers. And of course we see Saudi Arabia as a very strong market. We see Israel. So many years ago, Kenya used to actually import commodities from Israel, but now it's our turn to start exporting perishables to Israel, and we've already got contracts for the transportation of pineapples into Tel Aviv. And I think the thing which is very important, Reji, is that we need to offer direct flights. So this business of actually going via a hub, whether it's Istanbul, whether it is Dubai, Abu Dhabi, we have a different concept, and we actually offer direct flights. So if somebody has commodities to Saudi Arabia, he can actually fly on a direct flight rather than going via a hub. And this is something which is very important for our Kenyan perishable exporters, because we have to give them non-stop direct options. And we believe that this is something that we will also extend to the United States and also into some markets which are currently underserved. China is again a very big market, not so big when it comes to perishables, but it's a very strong market for imports from China into Africa. So this is something that we are also going to be doing. So it's a combination of having the right aircraft and the right markets. But the most important thing is that the winner is the Kenyan shipper, because I'm a Kenyan by birth, and also I'm a Kenyan citizen. And we will always make sure that our objective is to promote exports from Kenya first before we look at anything else. And I think this is what makes a difference between us and the other foreign airlines.
Jacob, airports play a very significant role in terms of facilitating trade. You become an anchor around which you have different stakeholders. Ken said about cold chain infrastructure, which is really important. How as an airport custodian who owns airports and operate airports, how do you ensure that you offer the best, or you become the facilitator operating some of the best infrastructure to support perishable flower exporters?
Well, thank you, Reji. Of course, as an airport, we look at what are the mega trends and what is transcending in the airport business internationally. We are aware of capacity and slot management as being one of the constraints. We know that airport development financing is an issue and an elephant in the house that needs to be addressed, because therein lies the financing and requirements that we need to see how we can improve certain infrastructure in the air service, air cargo business, and of course, air service quality. We are also looking at ground handling itself as a barrier to trade within itself, because it's one thing in the value chain for shippers to bring their goods or their perishables to the airport. It's another thing how they are handled. How do you make sure that this now transcends and moves from the quantity that you're passing through to the quality that's expected in the market? And of course, we also look at ourselves as an airport in terms of enhancing the air connectivity index. Like what Sanjeev has just mentioned, it's more costly to pass via hubs than to fly directly, because of course there are always aeronautical services that have to be provided every time you land into a hub and move, because it's not a free service. So that increases the flight costs if you have to move from hub to hub than move directly. But that then destination necessitates, depending on what kind of alliance you have, because you can fly red from Nairobi and then fly blue into the destination. But as an airport, we have worked closely with our stakeholders to make sure that certain services and even the human resource itself is compatible with the needs of the destination markets. Case in point, right now, we are really closely collaborating with our stakeholders to create what we call a cargo community, that we're able to share data easily without fear, because we understand that the markets that we are flying into have that kind of collaboration. This is an example with Brussels, this is an example with Frankfurt, this is an example with Liège. That airport community there are free to share data so that there can be visibility and transparency among every transaction in the value chain. That's the essence of what we're trying to do in JKA, particularly being the biggest air cargo handling airport in Africa. So in terms of that facilitation, we are mandated to share data, and we are working closely with relevant government authorities to make sure that we have that visibility, which are in positioning and planning, like we mentioned earlier, which is the essence of airfreight logistics. And indeed, without collaboration and stakeholder enhancement, in terms of how we relate, we cannot develop facilities, because our cargo growth and development strategy is focused from a pull-based other than a push. We do not develop infrastructure that we think should be necessary. We rely on stakeholders to give us feedback, so that we are investing on things they know across the value chain, because they are the business people. We are only a stakeholder that facilitates and enhances not only the environment, but the ease of doing business and reduction of costs, so that it's a win-win situation for both the operator of the airport, which is ourselves, and of course the users of the facility, which is them. So in that part, we are investing based on the feedback we get from the stakeholders, so that we are having a win-win situation. Like now, we are focused on increasing the number of cargo stands or cargo bays in our air freight area at JKA, so that we can carry at least 3 to 4 more wide-bodied aircraft that have got more capacity and can create a reliable air freight movement without hitches or change in frequency, because capacity is constrained. Like I mentioned earlier, capacity and slot management are some of the constraints that airports that are growing as fast as JKIA face, because airport development financing also comes as a constraint, because the planning is essential. But in this area where, for example, we have a market like China, let's say, for example, the Chinese start eating our French beans and we are able to feed just even 10% of the population. How much would that capacity be? We're talking about billions of people. Now, Sanjeev is mentioning that Saudi Arabia, and thank you, Ken, for beating my decision, for opening the World Cup. If you win the World Cup, so we can have actually more movements from Africa to send more flowers there, because it will be a celebratory moment.
I thought Ken would take an off today.
So we are looking at those spontaneous aspects that will happen in the market, which can create disruptions, because some of these markets rely on actually what's happening in an instant. You can have spot rates that will change the demand for capacity. And Mr. Sanjeev knows sometimes that much as there are certain rates for certain destinations, sometimes the competition is so steep that you have to offer certain spot rates to attract certain capacity, because if you are a frequency, and for you to maximize that trade length, you have to look at how your pricing levels are against your competition. And if you fly empty and you fly ferry backwards, then you cannot sustain the business. And that's the level of sustainability that air freight requires. You must have an outbound and a southbound. Ours is to make sure that the facilities are ready and we're able to collaborate with our stakeholders to the extent that we are doing what is in the vogue in other markets to attract the business. Like right now, we're talking so much about sustainability and doing green logistics because that is what is attracting business with the consumer markets. If you are not embracing green logistics, if you are not using the 3 R's that was mentioned earlier, reuse, recycle, and the other R, then you're not attractive to the people who are going to be consumers of your product. If you are not embracing certain aspects of green logistics, if you are not a market or collaborative aspect as an airport, that you are embracing things like eco-managing audit scheme, that you are competing against yourself, but at the same time you're collaborating to protect the environment in which you protect and which you operate in. Those are aspects that are attracting markets, and as an airport, we are really pushing towards that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. Roland, airport as a facilitator for global trade, facilitator for shippers, local shippers, both for import, export. Perhaps Frankfurt has much better advanced infrastructure that is readily available. Maybe some thoughts on in terms of how airports become a facilitator, how airports supports the cargo movement which require a cold chain infrastructure which is readily available in Frankfurt. But perhaps some thoughts on airports becoming or offering that ready infrastructure for perishable export.
What we are doing, we are listening to the market, as you also said, because if the market has certain requirements that we cannot fulfill, that flow will not go to our airport. So it goes without saying that temperature diversions are not happening, that speed is of essence, that safety and security is there, that the veterinary inspection and the phyto inspections are there. So that is I think the big airports do have that, but the cargo communities were mentioned. So we are actively in talking to the members of that community. So we are seeing where is the demand of the shipper, where is the demand of the forwarder, where is the demand of the buyer. So that all goes hand in hand. So I think that's what everybody is doing. We're listening to the need of the market, and then we are offering that product then as such. And the nonstop, even on a market like Frankfurt, you see right now there's no freighters going between here and Frankfurt. Why is that? Because the Lufthansa flight that was there, they said that aircraft produces more revenue in a different market, and they reallocated that aircraft. So you can build infrastructure, you can have everything ready, but if the market changes, it's sitting idle. So that is another risk that an airport has. So we are constantly talking to the airlines, and this is high on my list to attract maybe your national carrier here or one of the national carriers to again serve our market. Doors are wide open.
Thanks. I have one question to Faith, and then we will open up take questions from the audience. Faith, when you hear these industry stakeholders who support cargo commodity, the flowers of your customers, what are some of your demands from these air freight logistic stakeholders?
So let me start by describing the flower quality indicators. We can largely categorize them into two. We have the physical attributes, and then there's one that is invisible, but it's very key to flowers. So the physical attributes are like the mechanical damages, diseases like botrytis, foliage, freshness, and all that. And the invisible is what we call vase life. That is the flower longevity. How long will it maintain its appearance while in vase? And so there are 4 key factors that are affecting vase life. That is the flower longevity. Number 1, of course, is botrytis. Number 2 is senescence, which is basically caused by ethylene. Number 3 is the sugars, and number 4 is the water relations. So everyone in this flower chain, of course, it's a chain, and that chain is as strong as its weakest point. If anyone does not do what they're supposed to do, they are failing the entire industry. So all these 4 factors that I've mentioned that affect the flower quality are greatly influenced by one thing, that is the cold chain management. it is very important that everyone, from the grower at the farm, the transportation to the loading site, the logistics companies, from receiving all the way to dispatch, either on the air side or by sea. So what we see, and those a case recently, flowers were being transported by sea, and at some point the transporter forgot maybe and switched off the truck, and the reefer was off. And of course, these flowers did not reach the market in good condition, and it was very impossible to immediately pinpoint where the problem was, but it was simply on the temperature management. So can we have temperature monitoring systems such that a grower can sit and know this is what is happening, this is the time that it's taking from point A to point B, and all that. Secondly, to avoid premature aging, that is senescence, we have, again, it's attributed to cold chain, because at low temperatures, there's less ethylene being produced, and there's less sensitivity also to ethylene for the flowers. But there's also something that we call ethylene hotspots. Are we handling flowers together with fruits? That is very critical. We need to have very separate handling areas for flowers and fruits. Mm-hmm. If we do handle them together, we are losing out on the quality and the longevity of the flowers. Are we having smokers in our teams that are handling the flowers? Because of course the smoke fumes also produce some ethylene to some extent. Do we have diesel operations around the flower handling facility and all that? So we have also to be keen on the ethylene hotspots. So if we manage the ethylene hotspots and we manage the cold chain, we'll be good to go.
What is your advice, or do you have any specific complaints to be made to Astral Aviation? And so you can take that complaint maybe later. Any specific recommendations?
Good thing everyone who has spoken on this panel says they have an end-to-end cold chain facility on the loading site, so that is good. So now can we have the monitoring system to be sure?
Okay, we have a few minutes left. Questions from the audience.
Hello, my name is Abdi. One term I had over and over is limited capacity. So as partners in the industry, what are you doing about that currently to expand the capacity so that you don't have the challenges over and over again?
Challenges of capacity. I think that's Sanjeev has already spoken about it. You're talking about the air freight capacity? I think Sanjeev has already addressed that.
I can just say something about capacity. So when you look at the output of perishables or commodities from Kenya, it's 6,000 tons per week. And that's more or less what we believe is being exported from Kenya. And during the times of, let's look at the pre-pandemic levels. At that time, we had a situation where capacity was more or less in line with demand. And what we noticed in the first half of 2020 was that the capacity dropped. And the reason for that is because the passenger flights had actually stopped flying. And cargo had now the responsibility of also carrying the perishables which were previously moved on a passenger flight. And I think when you look at ratios, 50% of the cargo moves on a passenger flight and 50% moves on a cargo flight. So when the passenger flights stopped flying, all that perishables had to be flown by the cargo aircraft. And suddenly we noticed that the capacity dropped from 6,000 tons a week to nearly 2,500 tons per week. And this is now 2020. When you look at the current situation, we believe that the capacity is about 10% less than what it was pre-pandemic. What that actually means is that if you're looking at 6,000 tons of export volumes, you've got roughly about 5,200 tons of available capacity. And this is what we believe is a temporary situation. And we believe that starting from next year, we will start seeing some of this capacity coming back. Passenger aircrafts have started to fly, not as much as they should be. Only 60% of the passenger flights have resumed to the pre-pandemic levels, so there's still 40% flights which are not taking place. So as more and more passenger flights start coming in the air, more and more destinations are actually opened up, you'll start seeing a situation where the capacity will start getting to a much better situation. So I believe this is only going to happen by the first quarter of next year. And then I believe we will have a situation where for a couple of years, we will have sufficient freighter capacity which will meet all the requirements for Kenya. Ken?
Yeah, I think Sanjeev has explained that very well. I think from an airline perspective, capacity can return into the market or can be made available, but it's really gone back to the freight rates. It's really become competitive. So to get the freighter capacity, like for the perishable rates, the flour rates have to sort of up their game and compete with e-commerce and other products from the Asia Pacific and other areas. So it's really a question of, if we have the right freight rates selling in the market, we can attract the capacity back.
Of course, when we talk about capacity, we look at it two-pronged. There's the aircraft capacity, and of course, there's the infrastructural capacity in terms of, for example, how many freighters can you hold at once? Because if you look at the throughput of JKA, for example, is there about 1.3 million tons. And if you're moving only 370,000 tons a year, the deficit explains that we are still operating on excess capacity. But in terms of capacity constraints, in terms of slot management and how many aircraft you can park at the same time, I don't want to talk about other future developments that are above my salary grade, but those ones will hear as we move on. But we have a growth and development strategy that looks at expanding and moving air freight not to be so what we call Jomo-centric, and move it to the other network of airports that we have. We have plans to expand Eldoret so that 30% of what we export out of JKA, for example, comes from the western side and the north trip. And this road freight, we do not need that to continue happening because it's a jeopardy also on the shelf life and the quality of the product. So if you can move them out of Eldoret, then that capacity already reduces the load of JKIA in terms of hauling. So it's just a matter of expanding the necessary and requisite capacity in Eldoret so that we can fly northbound very easily from Eldoret, same with Kisumu and Mombasa, so that we reduce the capacity constraints in JKIA. And those are the things you're working on as an airport authority.
Thank you, Reji. I'm Christophe van der Meer, Sea Freight Perishable Manager, Kuehne & Nagel. Kuehne & Nagel in Africa, I think you all know, one of the biggest freight forwarders in air and sea. And I have a question maybe for Sanjeev and Ken, talking about capacity from Kenya to any place in the world. It depends a lot on kerosene prices, fuel prices that have really, I think, tripled since pre-COVID. But the other factor is, I think, for the revenue of your airplanes is the cargo coming in to Kenya. From European perspective, we would say, do you have enough southbound cargo? And that really dried up also during COVID. And Ken, you were mentioning, you can put planes over here quite easily, but not at 280 or 290 a kilo. It's going to be, well, maybe something double like that. So you need the southbound cargo to make your revenue. What are the developments you see or you predict on cargo imported by air into Kenya?
What we've seen, I'll talk about Saudi Cargo. The model we have is, as we position cargo aeroplanes or freighters into Nairobi to pick up the flowers and take them northbound, we look at intermediate stops. For instance, in southbound, the flights will stop in Addis Ababa with full load. They'll stop in Khartoum. We had a model before where we were stopping in Johannesburg before coming to Nairobi. So if the inbound cargo, the import cargo into Nairobi is not sufficient, we have a model where we look at intermediate stops to route the aircraft to Nairobi southbound. Okay. The other thing we do, and we have good cooperation with Astral Aviation as well as Kenya Airways, is we bring in import cargo here in Nairobi, and at the hub point, give it to Astral or give it to Kenya Airways to distribute for us in the Africa network, intra-Africa network. So we have that cooperation in place to boost the southbound cargo. But I do agree with you. You have empty aeroplanes coming in, then obviously the impact is on the northbound cost or pricing. But that's where now we work with Sanjeev or Astral Aviation to see how we can cooperate with airlines to meet that demand.
Thanks, Christian. I think perhaps I can also add that it's a very relevant question. One of the reasons why flowers and vegetables are so expensive from Nairobi to Europe compared to from South America is because of the imbalance of freight So East Africa is a very strong export nation, so we have a lot of perishable exports from East Africa to Europe. But sadly, East Africa is not a strong inbound destination. So what typically we do is we actually perform the triangle route where we fly from Nairobi into Europe into our hub in Liège, and then from there we fly into approximately 6 destinations, including Lagos, Accra, Johannesburg, Libreville. So this is a way in which we can actually balance the yields. One of the things that we've also done is we're also expanding our hub in Nairobi so that we can actually fly to more destinations out of Nairobi. And we're also in the process of setting up our new hub in Johannesburg, which should be ready by February 2023. And we believe that we need to bring in more freight into Africa. We need to keep that cost of freight low, and we also need to reduce the transit time. So this is something that is work in progress. And we believe that there will be a day when we will actually be able to match the outbound volumes from our hub in Nairobi with the inbound volumes, and actually have more freight which we would be able to defeed from Nairobi into the regions that we actually provide connectivity to. It's a very relevant question, it's very important, that we have to actually see Africa, which is currently in a state of recession, and of course, inbound volumes are very low. I believe inbound volumes are about 30% lower than what they were pre-pandemic. But we believe that starting from 2023, some of those volumes will start coming back, and we will actually have some level of stability in the pricing.
Thanks. Jacob, you want?
Yeah, actually, I have a question to the airlines and Frankfurt probably. I was just thinking, why would it be necessary for Lufthansa to leave Frankfurt and go to Johannesburg, to drop all the southbound cargo and then fly ferry to Nairobi to collect flowers, while they would actually drop in Nairobi and go down to Johannesburg and do the same coming ferry? Because I would also want to ask Saudi the same question, why they would leave Jeddah, come to Addis Ababa and drop cargo and fly ferry to Nairobi, because that ferry leg is a cost. Is that not a contributor to the freight rates that we now charge the perishables northbound?
I cannot speak for the airline and why the airline is discontinuing a route. Or we've seen some changes. We've seen Air Namibia go out of service. We've seen South African go out of service, maybe coming back. So there's a lag. So what I said earlier is we see route opportunities. So where is that aircraft generating the most revenue? And if they go in round-robin type of operation, that is costly, absolutely. But obviously, it's still producing more revenue than going from A to B on other routes. But that is what we are doing in our group. We're talking to the airlines, we're talking to the shippers, and see what can we do in order to stimulate that traffic and reactivate certain routings. So that is near and dear to our heart to do that. And this is a specific market here where we are highly interested in everybody, and it goes for the colleagues in the Netherlands, goes for the colleagues in Belgium. This is for all Europe. Because in Europe, you see that trucking is everywhere. It's easy, still easy. Although we lost many truck drivers as a result of the Ukraine, we had trucking companies that had up to 20% drivers, Ukrainian citizens. They all dropped everything and went home to fight. Things like that, fuel prices going up. So it's a multitude, but the airline will have to tell you why they discontinue. I cannot speak for the airlines, but we see that in many global regions. It's a constant process everywhere.
My name is Lakshmi. My question is, we've heard a lot of talk about digitalization in the air cargo business. The objective is that all stakeholders need to talk to each other and share information. How are African carriers and airports evaluating this, and have there been any discussions, and would you be adopting the same? Thank you.
Yeah, on the part of the airports and the Kenya Airport Authority specifically, we have embarked on a strategy of sharing data on a daily basis so that we can assist or enhance the planning stages of the users of the airport and the capacity that is available in the market. Because we've realized previously that we had flights coming in, and without the knowledge of the users of the airport, particularly shippers, some flights were actually going without fulfilling the entire capacity that they had. So we felt obligated to be sharing this information because we have that data as raw as it could be. Then we are now moving on to further deeper into the information where we can share not only the available capacity, but also the routings and the lines and the segments and the trade lanes that are trailing and what is above in certain markets. So that capacity sharing, also the airlines that are using the platform that we are sharing data with, find it quite useful that we are sharing that information, because as we create a community, it's important for data to be shared, and we might know, even for the shippers from the ground, or let's say the bottom of the pyramid views, in terms of farm to port, have an awareness that actually what capacity existed versus what they had and what deficits exist. So that's what we are working on, which was previously not available in terms of data, and we are working closely with other government stakeholders that are custodians of certain salient data, so that we can inform the market, because we know that data is what is important in any private, because supply chains must be sustained by predictable data, that you can have proper analytics, create new routines, visibility of market trends and what's happening and what are the mega trends in the market. So that we are doing in collaboration with our stakeholders.
I'm Nicholas Liseche from IAG Cargo. Most of you maybe don't know IAG Cargo, but it's British Airways, part of the International Airlines Group. I like the debate about why we are seeing low inbound freight into Kenya and more so into Nairobi. I think we need to identify the reasons why we are not seeing a lot of inbound freight. And part of the reasons I would say we need government involvement, because there are very many punitive laws that prohibit cargo from coming into Kenya. Secondly, the other thing is we need also to look at our processes and find out why most airlines would go maybe to Kigali or to Johannesburg with a lot of cargo than Kenya. I think it's something maybe Jack you need to take up with government authorities. I don't think we've a lot of industries or factories in Kenya. If you look at South Africa, there are so many industries and factories, and most of the cargo that goes there go into those industries and factories. Most of our factories have died here in Kenya, and that's the reason why we are not seeing a lot of inbound freight. Also, another reason is why many airlines are not bringing wide-body aircrafts here in Kenya is that our current runway cannot support that. I don't think we can accommodate larger aircrafts like Airbus A380, and we need probably Kenya Airports Authority to tell us what plans they have to bring such aircrafts into Nairobi. Thank you.
So I think that's more than a question. I think it's a comment and observation. Just want to get all of you to do a final comment and closing remark. Start with Ken.
Thank you, Reji, and thank you, everybody. I can see in this room, I think the last time we were here in 2019, I see quite a lot of familiar faces. Just to reiterate what I said earlier, Saudi Cargo, we feel we are flour specialists, perishable specialists in terms of exports from Nairobi and other points in Africa. That's a focus we have. During the pandemic, I think we're the only freighter carrier, I stand corrected, but we are the freighter carrier who did not cancel its freighter operations from Nairobi to take the aircraft elsewhere. We maintain daily flights from here. So it's a commitment we have to the perishable industry, the flour industry, that we are here for the long term to support the needs of the industry. Thank you very much.
Jacob?
Thank you very much, Reggie. In a nutshell, what I would say on behalf of the authority is that we are focused in fulfilling our cargo growth and development strategy to improve air freight infrastructure and services. And of course, we are looking at issues like capacity and slot management, airport development financing, where we are working closely with stakeholders to take up the PPP strategy that we have in terms of developing, so that we do not have a push strategy, but a pull strategy. And of course, one of the key aspects that we also are embracing and enhancing our stakeholders to look into involve having sustainable and practicing green logistics, e-freight, eco-management audit schemes, so that we can impact positively in our business practices, so that we can be able to attract markets. Because the trend is that if you're not protecting the environment, then you are not an attractive business partner to the markets that are trying to look into you as a source supplier. So basically, on those aspects, in terms of our internal business processes, in terms of the human resource, we are looking forward to collaborating further with our stakeholders so that we can be able to learn part of the business, because we are not the experts, but we are here to facilitate and create a business environment that everybody thrives in. And I think we extend a handshake and thank you very much for this opportunity. Sanjeev?
First of all, thank you, Reji, for coming back to Kenya after 3 years. I think it's so important to have such events so that we can actually be able to connect. We can also be able to learn and also share. And I think this is so important because the reality is that the pandemic is not over. Everybody believes that COVID is over. We've removed our face masks. We've lowered our guard. But we're actually seeing some new signs which actually shows that something is actually happening with this. And I believe it's very important to have a strategy which is of resilience, not to let the guard down, always have alternative options, diversify into new markets. And as a Kenyan cargo airline, it is our responsibility to our customers to actually make sure that we can be able to provide low cost, reliable and also direct air freight options to new markets, so that we're not over dependent on Europe. We need to look for new markets for our commodities, and we're here to make sure that we support the community in Kenya to actually reach new markets, and also to support the government in its moves of actually making sure that our private sector is more dependent compared to before. And of course, Kenya does not produce any oil and gas. Kenya is an agricultural country. And we have to make sure that we always remember that, and we always have to make sure that we continue to open up new markets for our commodities, so that the Kenyan farmer has actually got more choice now compared to before.
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to have Amiran Kenya here in this panel. So what I'd like to say is flour quality cannot be improved after harvest, but we all have a very huge and heavy responsibility to maintain this quality. So where we are headed, logistics will no longer be a game of numbers, but a game of who actually understands physiology and who knows about flour handling. So thank you.
Roland? From our side, again, thank you for having us here. If you're a shipper, if you're a producer, if you're a buyer, contact us. We are also the humble servants on the other side. We have got the largest perishable center in Europe sitting in Frankfurt waiting for your business. So let's take the opportunity and talk while we are here and see where we can jointly approach the airlines to make sure that the capacity comes back into the market.
Thanks. We are all the humble servants in the transport and logistics sector, and I think we have a great responsibility to support local farming community, local growers. Let's keep doing that, and let's be responsible to support the Kenyan flour industry, Kenyan perishable industry. Not just Kenya, that the entire Africa. It's just so much of potential, and we have a responsibility to support in whatever way that we can. That brings us to the end of this first panel discussion and conversation. I'd like to thank my speakers on stage, and I'd like to thank the listeners on inside the hall. Big round of applause to all of you. Thank you.